flexibility and creativity, choices are important to you.
Yeah.
And I'm sure both of you are familiar with the NLP idea that if you only have one choice, you're a robot, and if you only have two, you're in a dilemma. He's going, uh-oh. So I would suggest that between you, you only have two strategies. I would further suggest that these strategies work very well for you in the places that you've used them. But as you look young enough that you may spend a few more years on this planet, you may run into situations where you may want to have additional choices, knowing that you could always utilize this old reliable choice anytime you wanted to. So in that case, would you be interested in starting to get some new choices here in how you approach these things called math problems, although they're just an analogy for other kinds of problems in life as well?
Sure.
Okay, so what did we just do? That's conditional close, agreement frame, conditional close. All right? And so now, here's the thing, is that in each case, I want you to be the part that gets to decide whether or not another strategy would be useful or not. Whereas the other two members of the group, so that'd be you and me for Brent, or Brent and I for Cheryl, will be creative parts to you and make suggestions about possible other ways of doing the problems. In this case, math problems, in the case of whatever your situation is, whatever the disagreement is. So we could be creative, So we're going to say be creative. So, Brent, what if you look down the problems and you notice for ones that were the same kinds? Because they do mix things up. And then you could solve the ones that were the same kinds, because that would go faster. I wonder what you think of that.
That's probably a better idea.
Okay.
It could be a really good idea.
Okay, and then he can try that on, and then you, as a creative part, if you have an idea about another way that Brent could do it.
Actually, that sounds like a good idea. You could do all the addition ones, or all the multiplication ones, or you could do all the easy ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Or you could actually, if you said it builds up, you could look at the last problem and see what kind of concepts are involved in that problem.
Oh, there you go.
And then have an idea about what the ones might be, through the rest of the test.
Yeah. That's a good idea.
That is a good idea.
I'm a creative part. Okay, and vice versa. We're over here, and Cheryl, you have your strategy, and the idea is that this is your reliable strategy. Always can depend on it, always go to it. And if you were offered some other strategies that are as good as or better, I'm curious if you'd be willing to try them out.
Sure.
We'd like to make some offers as to what those might be.
All right.
Just kind of have an order and a sequence. Maybe it is just like what you're doing, easier to harder.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Creative.
Feel that congruency.
Well, no, that's the thing. What happens, you've done the 6-step reframe. Does every idea take? No, that's the idea. What I'm suggesting here is there's an opportunity to be an external creative part and to model creativity for the other person. Instead of looking through them, you could go at them randomly.
Okay. I like that idea.
She actually likes that idea. I wouldn't think you'd like that idea. And then another one?
Maybe if we just stayed on this one page and got everything done before we go to the next page. Yeah, like if it's a 2-page question,
okay.
math problem thing. Would you be willing to stay on one page and get that done before going to the next page?
Okay.
You can still be creative.
Right, I'm still...
Instead of saying,
sorry.
Remember Erickson pattern, instead of saying, would you be willing? I wonder, or if you did, or wouldn't it be curious, or... And I wonder, do you start always from the first and start to skip down? Or do you actually start like at the end of the test and start skipping up?
No, I always start at the top.
What would you start if you started at the bottom? I don't know. So that's something else you might try. You might, because after all, you skip around. You could just kind of look at the bottom first and go, oh.
I could.
Yeah.
I could.
Okay.
That's weird. Yeah, let's try that.
Okay.
All right. So what are we doing here is we're continuing where we were before. We're doing agreement frame, conditional close, and since we aren't going to do visual integrations, we do some 6-step reframing in the sense that we're offering the part, which is the person as the original strategy. Now you notice how I leveraged it. In fact, they were worried when I was doing this. Was the idea is like, you know this strategy really well, and it's the only one you've got. You, a guy who says he's flexible, adaptable, interested in choice. We have a solution. And that solution doesn't require you to give up anything. In fact, this ought to be your old standby strategy until you find one that is as good as or better than the one that you've got now. What we'd like to do is offer you some of those possibilities. So that's the leverage point, is that they keep this strategy until they have another one as good as or better. And he goes, well, I'll agree to that, because of course they don't think it'll ever happen. But once we're able to start offering them, and you see also that while we're doing that, there's also creative parts over here, right? Mm-hmm. So even while we're thinking up these things, we're actually modeling and encouraging creativity in the person as well. Can you have some fun with this? Yeah. All right, so into your groups, do a little reframing.
Tons of fun.
Now, if we were to do one more round, it would be to have you, in each of the exercises, step into being one of the people in conflict and doing what you were doing from the observer position. Okay? When I was out here and I had Cheryl and Brent and I'm talking to them, that's pretty easy because then I'm external to it. You know, I don't care about skipping around on math quizzes or doing them in order. I hire mathematicians to do that for me. It's another strategy. And it also makes it easy to operate the skills. What you might want to consider at some point is to take some of these experiences and some in the future where you do a little of this and you say, feel pretty good, I did this negotiation with these people, is then to step in and be one of them. And could you, at the same time maintaining the integrity of your position, also be able to go meta to it? Because you know sometimes that third person isn't there. And you've got to carry around that third person inside you. This, by the way, is what the meta position training is about. People wonder why we do these groups of 3. Says, why is it always in 3s? Well, the idea is that you're building a meta person, a person that can step out and be an observer to the situation and can also then step in, because in a sense, we're always doing that. That when we adjust, when we change our clothes because the temperature changes, then we're in the system, but we step out for a moment, we put it on. When we change the rheostat, when we change the temperature in the room, what we're doing is we're noticing, oh, it's warm, I'm going to adjust the temperature here. So we're both an observer and a participant. We shuttle back and forth. So in each of the times in this training, when you were in the meta position, you were learning about observing, about paying attention, at least this was the idea. You've still got a few more days to practice. Because there's going to be times when you're in a negotiations and there's no third person, and you're in it. There's the time when you want to be able to respect your position and be able to utilize these skills. A bit of practice, whether it's from this one or from this one. Yeah. So, a way of reviewing, a way of practicing, a way of realizing that you get good at this stuff by getting good at this stuff, by playing and practicing. So before I close that, is there any questions, observations, or reactions to the last exercise? Yeah?
We didn't so much when the 2 people were arguing and one person was kind of observing.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of getting them to step into that other person's position, we didn't really do that.
No, we didn't. And that's an additional skill you could have used, the idea about taking someone else's position. And if you've watched any of the commentators on the various so-called news programs, you'll know, well, I wouldn't step into that blankety-blank, blankety-blank, blankety-blank's position, right? And think about the father and the daughter. The father doesn't want to occupy the daughter's position that, nose rings are cool. It's just like So you don't have to do that. Now, eventually you can get there. And there's certainly high-quality information in shifting perceptual listening. You know that. But very often, people who have taken a position in an argument, in a relationship, and it's well-calibrated, as are these kinds of things where people have learned to fight, where they're just and then boom, you're off to the races because you know everything's supposed to follow from that. And in those well-calibrated situations, that stepping into others is going to come later. What you can do, and you got practice in, is you can begin to find out the meta outcomes, begin to get a different level of appreciation for what's going on. And with that appreciation, begin to introduce some flexibility into the system. Keeping in mind and honoring that the way the person does it now can always be their old reliable standby. They ought to use that until they have a better choice. And that slippery bit of language tends to work because people go, okay, fine, I'm not giving up anything. It's absolutely not. It works. Why would we, what we want to do is give you more ways to do things. You notice the world's changing a little bit? You might want to have some more choices in this new world. And people can go, yeah, that makes sense. And you can go from there. Anyone else? Yeah.
Well,
go ahead, skip around.
in our group, just like with Brent and I up there, where we ended up having the same goal, basically, we did the same thing. No matter what side we took, after we worked all the way through it and saw our options, we saw that the options that were available were palatable to both of us, no matter which side of the road we were on.
Yes, and that you get up to what the same kind of criteria.
Right.
Now, in another group that tasks themselves to be opposing political positions, they never did arrive at that. And at that point, I needed to finesse it a little bit, and I'll just do the slightest bit about that, was on one side it was about personal freedom, and on the other side it was about a sustainable environment. Now, here's where a little cleverness helps, because why have a sustainable environment if you don't have any choices? And if you've got great personal freedom, but you've got no environment to live in, what kind of choices do you have? So you could actually see that a person is in an environment, which is what I was doing. You have the person who wants personal freedom, and you have the person who wants an environment. And then you can leverage it like, well, you want personal freedom. Do you want to be able to like go outside? It's just like, what are the, so you can, that's what an example of a complementarity. It's where they aren't the same as you were finding, the same criteria that you'd end up are almost the same. So people go, yeah, choice, freedom, close enough. But instead, sometimes you end up where it's your cleverness that can come in and you go, wait a minute, these are complementarities. You can't have one without the other. And in that sense, then you can point that out and draw an agreement there.
And you are kind of taking them into second position when you're doing that as well.
It happens as a side effect, yes, is that the appreciation of the position is this person wants to make sure that there's a world to have personal freedom in. This person wants to make sure in that world there is personal freedom. And then you go, oh, well, maybe we aren't as far apart as we thought. Because, of course, there's all the other groups that want no personal freedom or don't want world. I mean, think about it, you might want to form an alliance given what else is out there. And again, it's playing with the framing. You're keeping in mind that you keep going up the criteria till what? Till you find one that gives more freedom to move. Like Virginia Satir, she didn't take the one where I want her to mind. Daughter's still going, goes up to because I love her. Oh. And deep motivation for this person. Remember, higher, deeper, these are just different metaphors. Higher criteria, the love I have for my daughter, my family, or the deep, then this becomes much more pervasive. And then you can find other ways of expressing that. And sometimes that's where the newbie, you go back over here, is, I have not worked in this area, but I know people that have in terms of abuse, the abuser, not the abused. And you get these very often men, not always in this situation, and you're asking them, and they say, I don't know what else to do. I'm not approving of any of it. I'm just saying at that point. And whether it's that extreme an example or a lot less, but certainly looks extreme these days in politics, where people are going, well, we can't give on our positions. They've got one choice. And there are so many other choices out there. This is where the new behavior generator, the idea of noticing how other people are doing it, going out and getting examples. Again,